Hello my friends, I'm Duchess and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be showing you guys the brushes that I use for drawing and for my webtoon, as well as my brush recommendations for the standard Procreate brushes. Let's get started. Thank you so much to Sora and Rika-chan for requesting this video. I really appreciate you guys commenting, letting me know what you guys would like to see. I'm going to start off with my favorite brushes that I always use regardless of whether or not I'm making a webtoon. So here are my brushes. I try to keep my Procreate app as organized as possible so all the brushes are grouped together. I have quite a lot of brushes and many of them I bought for the purpose of making a webtoon and to draw. I felt like the standard brushes just weren't fit for my art style. When I first started, I bought some from Julia Razamosa, but I don't really use hers anymore. I also bought lots of pattern brushes and designs from Etsy. The brushes that I use most are these brushes here labeled OG. I made these a while ago. It's kind of complicated to make brushes in my opinion. I literally had no idea what I was doing and I just played around with the settings and eventually made these brushes. I actually really like them and always use them. For sketching, I have this sketching brush here. I gave it a tiny bit of texture, but it's hardly visible. It's like a very smooth pencil. I have a smaller version of the sketching brush, which is a duplicate of the regular sketching brush. It's easier for me to make another thinner version instead of always changing the size of the brush. Especially since I'm a webtoon creator, I want my lines and art to be consistent when it comes to the thickness of my line art, so I try not to change the brush size. Instead, I duplicate the brush and adjust the size if I want to make the thickness of it thinner or thicker. Here is my ink brush, which is for line art. It's like a pen and it's very smooth. There's a tiny bit of pull on it, but it's just enough so that my lines don't feel too loose. I prefer more pull than looseness. I also have a duplicated ink brush with a smaller brush size, which is for drawing smaller details as well, but I label it as deets because that's how I shorten the word details. For coloring, I always use this coloring brush here. I'm not sure what the difference is between this brush that I made and the standard round brush that's in the painting set for Procreate. I think mine has a little extra pull to it because it just feels more comfortable to me. Then I have my lash thin brush. It's a terrible name and I made it with the purpose of using it for drawing eyelashes. I do use it for much more than the eyelashes. I use it for all the highlights as well, so I'm not sure what to call this brush. Let me know down in the comments below if you guys have any name suggestions. The other brushes in this set are not really ones that I use. I might just delete them. Thanks to Adenis's suggestion, I actually made my own panel and bubble stamps. It was such a brilliant idea and I can't believe I never thought of it. I guess that's why there's the saying about two heads always being better than one. Thank you again for the suggestion. Webtoons typically have different sizes for panels, so I made 5 different stamps. I can use the warp tool to readjust the sizes slightly if I want. I have a square size and a flat panel stamp. This flat one is more for panels that show more background or have more people in it. Then I have the wide, the big, and the narrow, and I think those names are pretty self-explanatory. My next set of brushes are my bubble stamps. I have quite a few. I have small and large sizes. I have thought bubbles and speech bubbles. I also have double bubbles for when characters speak a lot. I don't have a bubble for every single occasion, but I can always make those when those occasions come around because they're occasion. Brushes are pretty cheap to buy, but I know it's hard to find good brushes and you might not want to spend money on it, so I understand. If you don't have panel or bubble stamps, use this thin brush from Procreate. I highly recommend it. If you go to inking, look for the fine tip brush. This is a standard brush that I used to use all the time for making my panels and my bubbles. It's very fine and I would use it at the maximum brush size. Alright, now I have this big brush set, which is a huge compilation of different brushes that I have used at least once for my webtoon. I put this set together about a year ago. I don't use all the brushes anymore, but I do use a few of them from time to time. At the top, I have that fine tip brush I was talking about, then some brushes here that I think I might have made but never used. These 5 brushes here are from Julia Racemosa, but I don't use those anymore either. Sorry if I'm saying the name wrong. Well, most of these brushes are from Julia Racemosa, but I haven't used some of them for quite some time now. The one I do use more frequently is the Hair 22 brush, which is for the highlighting of the hair. I sometimes use it to blend the highlights. I also use this Shadows Powder Rouge 1 here for the blush. I got that from Julia Racemosa as well. I make my character's cheeks blush by lightly applying this brush. The rest of the set are some random effects that I use once in a while. I just felt that it was easier to have all the brushes I use for Webtoon in one spot, so that way I didn't have to go through all the brushes and look for them. For shading, I always use my coloring brush from my OG set. I like it because it's very smooth and easy to use. Other than that, I don't really use any other brushes. If you don't know what brushes to use, I'll show you guys the standard brushes that I would use and that I have used before. So as I said earlier, I would use the fine tip brush for the panel. For the sketching, I would use the Procreate Pencil. That's the one I used to use before I made my own. I don't personally like the texture, but sketches are just there to help you with the drawing, so it's okay if the sketch doesn't look amazing. For inking or making the line art, I recommend the Technical Pen or the Studio Pen, which are found in the inking standard Procreate set. The Technical Pen is very loose. If you're comfortable with loose lines, then that one would be good for you. If you like more pull when you're drawing, then the Studio Pen would be better. It's also neater and not as squiggly, but they both have a bit of texture to them. I spent a lot of time looking at each of the standard brushes to see which ones I liked most, and those two were always some of my favorites out of all of the standard Procreate brushes. I actually honestly didn't really like any of them, but those two were the most doable ones, I guess. I also used the round brush for shading and for blending. I found it easier to rely on a smaller amount of brushes, so I only used a few at the beginning. I actually, surprisingly, really like the texture of this round brush. Maybe I'll start using it again. For highlights, I would use the round brush as well. It was a simple way of making a Webtoon and it made it easier for me, so those are my standard brush recommendations. If you are a newbie Webtoon creator and feel intimidated because you don't know what brushes to use and whatnot, these are brushes that I started out with, so you can definitely start with these as well. You don't have to spend any money on extra brushes or anything, and you can still have great art. I hope that this video was helpful to you. That is all I have for you guys this week. If you guys enjoyed this week's video or learned something new, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get notified. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next week.